Here's a few news articles. This was pretty interesting. The Canadian government has decided to ban Flipper Zero devices in order to prevent the theft of cars. So Flipper Zero has a very good response to the Canadian government, explaining how Flipper Zeros cannot really steal a car, except perhaps very old cars that are ridiculously vulnerable. What's very interesting is they show you how to steal cars. So here's how a keyless entry system works. It detects your key with wireless signals, and if you're near the car, then you can just push a button to start the car. And it does that with going back and forth, and here's how thieves steal your car. They have to have a powerful radio here to pick up the signal from the original key inside your house through the wall, and then relay it to a repeater here, which will now make it think the car is there. And they show you the hardware. Here it is for sale for 13,000 euros. You have to buy these devices, as opposed to Flipper Zero that cost about 150 bucks. And they say you need to have 4 radios in these devices, and their device only has 1 radio. So it's very interesting. And they say they're for sale though. And see, this will break into all these different brands of cars: Mercedes, BMW, Nissan, Subaru, and so on. So that's pretty interesting. And they're explaining. I thought that was a very interesting response. So there's a new vulnerability, which is pretty cool. This is a denial of service attack, and it works at the application layer, and it's very simple. All you have to find, let's see, is that the one? Yeah, here's the detailed vulnerability report that is pretty simple. Let's see right there. So what you do is you have to have a protocol like DNS where you can send it a incorrect request with an error in it, and you've spoofed the from address to appear to come from here, and it will then send an error message to that server, and then that will send an error message back to this server. And what you need to have is a protocol where it replies to an error message with another error message. And apparently there are a lot of those. So after this, it will just send back and forth, tying up both servers. And they say a bunch of services are vulnerable to this: TFTP, DNS, and NTP, and also a lot of old ones like Chargen and Echo and Time. So that's a cute little attack, and they've been. Some people have patched it, but it's hard to patch all the old ones, especially since a lot of these services are the kind of things people put up and leave running for years without updating them. So that was an interesting vulnerability. This I thought was extremely interesting, and I'm probably going to use this in my consulting. People are worried about post-quantum cryptography, and Google is more worried than most. And Google says they expect post-quantum cryptography to destroy, they expect quantum computers to destroy public key cryptography within 10 to 15 years, which is much sooner than I expected it. And that means they are right. We have to switch now, because there's a store and decrypt later attack, which is what the NSA is doing, and a lot of people do. All they have to do is record your traffic now and hold on to it for a few years until it becomes crackable. And they also said something I was very pleased to see. They say the problem is the new post-quantum cryptography systems are very new and unproven, and maybe you shouldn't trust them. So they say you should have everything going through 2 layers of encryption. One with the old-fashioned technique like elliptic curve, and another one with the post-quantum technique like Kyber, so that you're protected by both of them. And only if they both fall will your data be vulnerable. So that seems like a very good idea, and they have a lot of details about how they're going to do it here. And so I think this is very important, and I'll probably be using this to advise my clients to move towards post-quantum cryptography. It's very good to have a relatively authoritative model. It would be better if I had an official government recommendation, but a recommendation from Google is pretty good. So this is raising a chicken and the egg problem. So when you do a secure boot, your operating system verifies the integrity of components as it loads them, and this is how iPhones work, but the Trusted Platform module is the firmware used to first boot up your machine, and how can you tell that it hasn't been altered? You have to have some trust somewhere. And you have the, anyway, these guys talk about what can't be attested is the trusted computing base itself. This you have to take as the root of trust, and there's about 60,000 lines of code in it, and they're talking about it. So they're talking about ways to verify its authenticity, and they explain how they're building in something with, I think, basically a hardware component to verify the hash of the original trusted component code, which is what you would need. That's why I say one way to do this, which is not exactly what they're doing here. One way is to go back to the old-fashioned way. 20 years ago, computers had a boot ROM that was really a ROM. It could not be updated at all. It was a hardware chip. And so you knew what was on it, and it couldn't be changed. And the only way to update the BIOS was to mail you a new physical chip to put in. And then you could have something and be pretty confident it hadn't been altered. Anyway, they do have this thing called firmware limited objects. So they have some way to verify the accuracy of the original code, which certainly should be a step in secure boot. This brand of dash cams have been vulnerable for more than 2 years. Everybody, your dash cam, your physical location is broadcast to anybody that wants to see it on the internet, and the contents of the dash cam are broadcast to anybody that wants to see them, and the manufacturer has been told over and over again for years, and they just don't care. So apparently you have to opt in to like it being visible over the internet, but I think people don't understand they're making it visible to everybody. And they can also physically track the location of your car, so it seems pretty serious. And one of the researchers finally gave up getting these guys to do anything about it and just dumped it publicly. So it's a thing to be aware of if you're using that camera. And there's a new Blue Spy attack. Now this relies on some Bluetooth vulnerabilities, which I think happen if your Bluetooth is not correctly designed, but apparently a lot of products have this flaw where you can, a common vulnerability, you can then access the Bluetooth device without alerting or notifying the owner at all, so you can listen into other people's phone calls. If they're using Bluetooth, you can hear both sides of the conversation. And so they demonstrated this recently, and they show this is because it supports something called JustWorks pairing, which is some kind of reduced traffic pairing, which apparently is vulnerable. So it's able to connect, and the person doesn't know. So that's important to know, a vulnerability in Bluetooth, in case anybody didn't know that Bluetooth is pretty vulnerable. And this one is pretty amazing. Kubernetes is super important. Kubernetes is being used by all major cloud services. Kubernetes is the Greek name for like an admiral that controls a fleet of ships. And the idea is you control a whole fleet of Docker containers, so you have a server, like a web server, and you have the golden image of your server, and you have multiple copies that are running, and as you get more traffic, the Kubernetes master system will spin up more copies as needed to balance the load. And the Kubernetes now has a code injection vulnerability that lets attackers take over the machine completely. So that's the thing to know. You've got Kubernetes, you have to update it. Like post-quantum cryptography, Kubernetes is very new. It's only been used for a couple of years, and that's why a lot of people would be reluctant to trust it. But it is so valuable, people are using it anyway. Both Kubernetes and Docker are very new, and but they do provide a service that is so valuable that everybody's using them, even though they know they're really new and probably not really stable or secure yet as much as you'd like.
Docker is also like a management type of thing?
Yeah, Kubernetes is the management above a Docker fleet. Yeah. And you can, there's various versions of it. You can install Minikube.
So
Yeah.
Kubernetes manages the Docker.
Yes, Kubernetes manages the Docker. It controls your Docker.
Docker manages the container?
Yes, and Docker runs the containers, exactly. That's it. So this is a cute idea. So if you want to ask an AI chatbot to do something like make poison or malware, they won't do it because they have a defense system to stop that. But all you have to do is sneak the forbidden word past the sensors, and they found they can do it with ASCII art. So if you go down here, there, this counterfeit. You're going to ask it to tell you how to make counterfeit money, so you express the word counterfeit this way. And then you tell it to extract the word from there, and now provide step-by-step instructions how to make and distribute that word money. And after this, it will tell you how to make counterfeit money, because passing the word through this way bypasses the filter that would look for the bad words. This is about the same as code injection vulnerabilities. If you have a SQL injection or cross-site scripting, people will often filter out one character, like the less than character, and all you have to do is encode the less than character so that when it hits the filter, it's not a less than, but when it's processed later, it is treated as a less than. And that's what's going on here. Apparently, the filter that looks for forbidden words is before it does all the processing here. And so after it does the processing, it recreates that word that wasn't supposed to get through the filter. In the world of web apps, this is why you do output encoding instead of input encoding. Anyway, it's a easily understood attack. So I didn't know this. Google Cloud databases are like Amazon EC2 databases, and apparently they're often configured to be world readable, which is what happened to all the EC2 databases up until a couple of years ago. So they found 900 plus open Google Cloud databases dumping out 1.25 million user records available. So it is a thing to be aware of. It happened to Amazon, and it's happening to Google too.
You need to do hacking anymore.
That's right. There was even a cartoon like this where they said the old school hackers have to have exploits. Now you just find credentials lying around and use them. Absolutely. And this is commonly how people break in with ransomware. They just buy credentials on the dark web. People just steal them and they just sell them. Yeah. And that way there's no malware. You just log in with valid credentials of a valid user. It's very hard to detect. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to stop.